Muy buenos días, otra emisión más de Fahrenheit. Hola, Carlos.
Hola, muy buenos días.
El día de hoy, Carlos, ¿de qué vamos a hablar o a quién vamos a tener hoy?
Bueno, vamos a hablar de un evento que tuvimos el viernes pasado. Nos visitó el premio Pulitzer Viet Thanh Nguyen. Bueno, es un escritor de origen vietnamita que radica desde hace muchos años o desde los 4 años en Estados Unidos. Y pues es importante pues mostrarles lo que sucedió ese día. Realmente la plática estuvo bastante interesante y bueno, aunque está en idioma inglés, que es lo que vamos a reproducir, pues para nosotros fue muy importante haberlo tenido, haber organizado el evento, que no solamente brindamos el espacio, sino nos involucramos en la organización. Y bueno, realmente el escritor también está muy contento de estar en la biblioteca, ¿no? De ver que pues nuestras colecciones, como en este caso los cómics, eran parte de la biblioteca. Y bueno, pues es muy importante para nosotros comentar lo que sucedió el viernes, ¿no?
Sí, y bueno, y también habló sobre su libro El simpatizante, que fue el que le dio el premio Pulitzer. Carlos ya había hablado del simpatizante previamente, pero bueno, el libro estuvo a la venta y platicó con estudiantes de nivel de licenciatura de literatura. Y bueno, vamos con la pregunta que le hicimos, que la pregunta fue que cuál era la importancia que para él tenían las bibliotecas y cuál era su biblioteca favorita.
Sí, bueno, pues aprovechamos la participación del escritor ahí. No podemos dejar pasar la oportunidad de llevar agua a nuestro molino y preguntarle acerca de las bibliotecas, la importancia que tienen las bibliotecas en la universidad, en la vida personal. Y bueno, él nos responde pues esta pregunta. Les volvemos a aclarar que bueno, el video que se va a presentar está en inglés, pero bueno, pues creo que vale mucho la pena pues mostrar lo que sucedió ese día, y más viniendo de un premio Pulitzer, que no es cualquier visita, ¿no? Y no cualquier momento tenemos una personalidad así en las bibliotecas.
Pues bueno, vamos con el video y les invitamos a leer El simpatizante de Viet Thanh Nguyen.
He met one of his favorite children's book writers and illustrators, and he was so inspired that night. He went back to our room and he drew a comic book called Chicken of the Sea. And I wrote the words for him, but the story was all his, because I could never come up with the story. The story is about bored chickens who decide to become pirates. I'm too old to think of a story like that. So I put that comic book on Facebook, and an editor said, "Oh, is this for real? Can we publish this?" And I said, "Of course, I want to make some money off my child." And so it's a real book now called Chicken of the Sea, okay, with professional artists, but nevertheless. And the reason why I'm telling you this story is because when I learned actually a lot from my son, 5 years old, now 9 years old, because he is completely unself-conscious. And he has crazy ideas, which are fantastic. But when the older I get, maybe the older everybody gets, you become more and more conventional. You think, I can't do this, I can't do that, because no one else is doing this and no one else is doing that. And when I look at my son, he doesn't care about any of those things. Chickens can become pirates, why not? And wherever he goes, he likes to just run outside and play. He doesn't care who's looking at him. He just runs and plays, and he loves superheroes. He's acting out all these superhero stories in his head. The reason I'm telling you this is because when I wrote my second novel, The Committed, I was very much thinking about him. Because the key question I always ask myself is, why not? Why not? Why can't I do this? Let me just do this. And I think the spirit of being playful is something that we all have when we're children, and it allows us to be very creative. And I can see little boys and girls in my children's schools. They're artists, and somehow they're all artists, right? But by the time they're 20 or 30, only a few of them will be artists. Very few. So what happened? What happened? And so I think, in addition to learning how to be vulnerable, the other thing I had to learn how to do was to be playful. And that is, by the time you're an adult, you're serious, you're not supposed to play, and writing is supposed to be very serious, and I'm thinking about the canon and all that. No. It's like writing is also about being playful. And that if you can tap into that, if you can get rid of you have to learn the rules of whatever genre you're doing, but you also have to learn how to break the rules and to give in to every kind of childlike impulse you have. And if your imagination takes you somewhere, just go follow the imagination. That was a very important thing for me to learn. And that relates to the library question, because when I was a child in the library, in the San Jose Public Library, which is the most important library, to answer your question, there were no boundaries. So there would be one corner for the children's books, and another corner with the young adult books, and another corner with science fiction, and another corner with the adult fiction. But there were and there were labels on these books, but there was no boundaries. So I could walk anywhere I wanted and read any book I wanted, and that is the beauty of the library, and the danger, right? Because at 8 years old, I was reading all the great children's books and everything, and then at 10 or 12, I wandered over the young adult section, and I started reading science fiction and fantasy, and I also started reading detective stories. And honestly, there was a lot of sex in these stories. And when I was 10 or 12, my parents were Catholics, they never talked to me about sex. So everything I learned about sex was from these books in the library. And that unfortunately or fortunately made me the person that I am today. Capable of imagining sex with a squid, which is what happened in the Sympathizer. And it's not been a joke, because at 12 or 13, I wandered over to the adult section, and I read a book called Portnoy's Complaint by Philip Roth. Maybe you've never heard of it. But Philip Roth, very famous American writer, and Portnoy's Complaint was probably his most famous book, most popular book for sure, in 1968. It sold millions of copies. It was banned in Australia. But Portnoy's Complaint is by a young Jewish American boy, and he's growing up, and I don't know if this word exists in Spanish, he's horny. Horny, that's what means he's just obsessed with sex. And I'm reading this book at 12 or 13, I don't know anything about sex. All I remember for years and years is that Alex Portnoy masturbates with everything he can find. And it culminates in him being so horny that he goes into his family's refrigerator and he finds a slab of liver. And he masturbates with a piece of liver, finishes, and puts it back in the fridge for his family to eat later that night. And I thought, gross. Who eats liver for dinner? So my family ate liver for dinner, so I identified with this. But that's all I remember about that book for 30 years. And so when I wrote The Sympathizer, I went back and I reread all the books that had confused me and puzzled me, including Portnoy's Complaints. I reread the book and I learned a lot more. But honestly, that's all that stayed with me. And so when I wrote The Sympathizer, after the sex with the squid episode, my narrator, who's 12 or 13, he's so horny, he masturbates with a squid, and then he puts it back, and then he has to eat it for dinner later that night. That's playful, right? That's the imagination at work. So that's what libraries can give us. And that's why it's dangerous, because my parents would have been shocked if they knew I was reading these things. And I feel the same way with my son. I give him all kinds of books, and sometimes I wonder, should he be reading these things and learning these words? For example, I keep all my books on display in the living room, and sometimes he'll walk by and he'll look at the cover of the books, and I think he sometimes opens the books to look at them. There are a lot of dirty words in my books, and a lot of sex and things like that. So I think he's learned some dirty words through me. But I think, what the library symbolizes for me is that we have to trust our children. Right? We give them all these books and we give them freedom. And part of it is about learning how to read and learning how to have fun with the stories. But it's through these books that we also get exposed to the world. And that's what awaits all of us. I can only protect my children so much. But they're going to go out to school, they're going to go out to the schoolyard, they're going to learn all kinds of terrible things. I can't protect them from that. But at least with books in the library, they're learning these things through art, through stories. And these things will stay with them. And that's part, so the library for me was about learning to love literature, but it was also about learning how to struggle with difficult things, like emotions and sexuality and adulthood. And your parents are supposed to teach you, and your friends are supposed to help you, but the library also serves such an important purpose for all of that. And so it's not about being sentimental. That's one thing. It's beautiful and it's dangerous in the library. And that's what literature and ideas are supposed to be about as well.